So ladies, gentlemen, welcome to a brand new video, and today we are breaking down the new official trailer for Peacemaker Season 2. We also have quite a lot of other details coming out from James Gunn at San Diego Comic Con, whether that's from the Peacemaker panel that I think you guys would be very interested in hearing. And of course, there is quite a bit to dive into with the trailer itself, teasing some wild scenes that could have some pretty nuts Easter eggs involved in it, and maybe you guys know the one that I'm on about. I also know that James Gunn revealed the official images of the metahuman mural that was featured in the Hall of Justice in the Superman movie, which, as you guys know, I've been anticipating that, but I think I'm going to save that for a separate breakdown video to just kind of really dig into it and just the larger things that can be taken out of that. So just before we dive into this, ladies and gentlemen, if you are brand new here, we cover a lot of DC on the channel, so consider subscribing for all kinds of future updates. And if you enjoyed the video, drop a like to help support the content. But let's now get into this. And there's quite a bit to unpack here. So at the beginning of the trailer, we see the 11th Street kids have met up again to have a few beers since, you know, they've gone their separate ways last season. We know that things are pretty different after all, since Vigilante Adebayo exposed her mother, we can't forget, Amanda Waller herself, and Argus to the world with just the whole Task Force X thing. And this has had a bit of a ripple effect because Waller isn't so happy, and it's kind of put Harcourt and Adebayo in a bit of a different place. We'll learn more about that with some other details that we got from the panel and James Gunn. And as for Economos or Diebeard, well, we know that he's been up to quite a bit outside of Team Peacemaker with Creature Commandos, and Vigilante, you know, he's probably just been waiting beside his phone for a call from Peacemaker. But as for Peacemaker himself, well, we hear him say at the beginning of the trailer, "I've changed a lot since I last saw you. I don't want to be a joke anymore. I want to be a real hero." And this is such a huge driving force of Peacemakers this season, as we know from the first teaser and what we see featured again in this one, with Adebayo saying, take something bad and make something good out of it. Well, one of those steps to go about doing this is the Lord Tech Justice Gang interview that we'll see in episode 1, but they more or less view Peacemaker as a joke, and yeah, I think we all know that Peacemaker will not end up in the Justice Gang. And to add even more context to where Peacemaker is at this season, James Gunn said in a new interview with IGN that the theme about Season 2, if anything, is about redemption. This is a character who knows he did wrong in the past, and he's changed dramatically from Season 1. The one thing I didn't want to do is to have Peacemaker act exactly like he did at the beginning of Season 1. We saw dramatic things happen to him in the way he's connected to other people in Season 1, and he has changed because of that. His friendship with Vigilante Adebayo has changed him completely, and now this is a new Peacemaker who is struggling to try and be the best person he can be, often failing, but really trying his best to do that. And then, all of a sudden, his past won't let him go. Whether it's his relationship with his father, who's now gone, or his relationship with Rick Flag Sr., so it's really about that struggle, about looking for redemption, and also looking for love. There is also a love story. So if the first season was about the relationship between Adebayo and Peacemaker, this, in a lot of ways, is about Peacemaker and Harcourt and their relationship. Now, Gunn also spoke of Rick Flag Sr., and that is what appears next in the trailer. So after we hear Harcourt saying that Peacemaker, you know, kind of wears a clown costume who goes out and beats up people, which, you know, gives us a tease at some of the action that we've got to look forward to in Season 2, the trailer then quickly switches up with Rick Flag Sr. saying that he needs to find the Peacemaker. Now, of course, he details how he killed his son, and we even get to see Joel Kinnaman's face pop up again in some files that Rick Flag Sr. can really dig into now that he's got full access as the head of Argus. We also see what appears to be a funeral, and I believe there's even rumors, speculation-y kind of rumors, don't worry, that Joel Kinnaman could very well actually be in this season, sparingly, if at all. So here's to hoping we do actually get a flashback or just something with his father, or perhaps Peacemaker being haunted by the guilt of killing him, which could bring us a scene between them both. It's kind of like how Peacemaker's dad sat down next to him at the end of Season 1 when he wasn't actually there. but we really do just see how tunnel visioned Rick Flag Sr. is here compared to just how we've seen him in Creature Commandos, or even briefly in Superman. We get to see a scene of them actually face to face, which we were teased with in that behind the scenes teaser for season 2, but now we get to hear Rick Flag Sr. say that my son was a better man you could ever dream of being, as he proceeds to beat the crap out of him. And I think this is going to be a pretty interesting scene, because I don't think Peacemaker's going to do anything to challenge any of the punches coming his way. And I really wonder, like, where this is going to go beyond that, as I doubt Rick Flag Sr. is just going to let Peacemaker go. Rick Flag Sr. also has a brand new Argus team surrounding him this season, with new characters featured such as Sasha Bordeux and Langston Fleury. But also, as we've seen in Creature Commandos, John Economos has been kept on in his kind of techie kind of role, and he even gets partnered up with one of their new Argus agents, none other than Judo Master, which is just gonna be bloody hilarious. Now, Steve Agee, who plays John Economos, even said at the Comic Con panel recently that he's a little torn. I'm working for this monster here for a lot of this season. I mean, we all know his relationship to Peacemaker by this point, and so I'm walking a very thin line this season, which does kind of make me wonder if it's Economos who will give Adebayo the heads up to then give Peacemaker the heads up about what's coming his way, which is what brings us to that scene in this official trailer of Adebayo with Peacemaker, telling him that he's being monitored by Rick Flag Sr. But this is where another huge part of this season is teased that we first saw featured in the first teaser for season 2, and that's of course the other world that we'll see featured in this show. So at the Comic-Con panel, James Gunn briefly describes where Peacemaker is at and just why he's driven to go through that doorway to the other parallel dimension. Peacemaker is a different guy this year. He's dealing with the demons he's sort of uncovered from the first season and trying to just deal with them, and the world is not accepting him and the way he is. They aren't accepting him as a hero. He's in love with Amelia Harcourt. She isn't accepting him. So he's not getting anything that he wants, and he discovers a parallel dimension through the quantum unfolding chamber, and he thinks it's a perfect universe, and that is the beginning of the story, and it kind of goes from there. And I mean, another way to put it is also, as James Gunn said over on Twitter when introducing the new poster, if he can't find peace here, maybe he'll find it somewhere else. So this is when Peacemaker tells Adebayo that he has a dimensional portal and it leads him to a parallel world, and that he's tried to make up for his mistakes, but he's not sure if redemption is possible. So he is going to make another life in the other world. And what's kind of cool about Peacemaker going to make this life in the other world is that it kind of brings into question all of the scenes that we see in this official trailer that we see taking place in this other dimension. I mean, it's clear in the scenes we get in this trailer footage that when he's talking to Adebayo in this moment, Peacemaker would have been there a couple of times already and has likely learned enough to even be able to tell Adebayo about it in the first place. And we even see in the trailer that at some point he tells Vigilante about it, who just kind of finds the whole possibility of having a dimensional portal in his house pretty sick. Because let's not forget that we know from the first teaser that the other dimension's Peacemaker confronts our Peacemaker once he goes through the doorway and he holds the gun up to his head asking who he is. And I've had a theory ever since we saw that scene in that first teaser that it could, you know, and it's not a reaching theory, but it could lead to a fight that breaks out, right? And honestly, I do want to stress, no idea if this will remotely be near the truth, but I don't know if in that moment it would end up with our Peacemaker actually killing the other dimension's Peacemaker. So the thing is, I could imagine that they could comedically do that as something unintentional that happens, but it's left off as a it is what it is kind of situation, which then leads to our Peacemaker to put on this other dimension's Peacemaker's clothes and live his life, which he just ultimately falls in love with. And that scene with Peacemaker bringing Vigilante to the quantum unfolding chamber and probably to the doorway of that dimension, it could be, and yes, I'm reaching here, but it could be to help him do some cleanup. As interestingly, if you look closely there, Vigilante is holding a bunch of cleaning supplies as they make their way to that doorway. So Could they be trying to get rid of a body? I do also, of course, have to entertain that he could just detain the other Peacemaker and he keeps him alive, just captive somewhere. Either way, something like what we've been discussing here happens for our Peacemaker to even be able to resume the other dimension's Peacemaker's life without interruption. For a little bit, that is, because, of course, if he's still alive, then he could break free and not exactly appreciate how his life has been stolen, which, to be honest, really reminds me of the plot for Apple TV's Dark Matter show. I mean, if anyone's seen that recently or in the past year, however long it's been out, you should know exactly what I mean there. As after all, what our Peacemaker will experience in this other world is everything he's really desired. As he says when he's wearing the other dimension's upgraded Peacemaker helmet and riding his bike, best dimension ever. This world's Amelia Harcourt appears to be in love with Peacemaker. His father is around, and it's not a stretch of the imagination to say that he probably loves his son and that they have a good relationship. And it's actually been long speculated that in this other dimension, on the mural that is featured in the trailer that we've seen for quite a while behind the scenes, not only do we see this other dimension's Peacemaker and his father White Dragon as heroes, but there's also another mystery character who could actually turn out to be his brother who never died as a child. So I mean, how much of a head feck will this all be for our Peacemaker? I mean, he'll be loved and appreciated in this world by a different version of Harcourt. He'll have the relationship with his father that he's never had, and he'll maybe even have his brother Keith still being around. So you just know that all of this is going to lead to some crazy emotional scenes. And speaking of, we also see how Adebayo wants him to stay here. No matter how green the grass is over there, you belong here with us. Which leads to more scenes later on in this official trailer showing Harcourt saying, "We're gonna get Chris back," which makes me wonder if perhaps maybe the other dimension's Peacemaker doesn't die, and let's just say he breaks loose from initially being captive and ends up taking our Peacemaker captive, and so the 11th Street kids have to try and save him. Ultimately there though, honestly, who knows? These clips in the trailer could really just lead you down the rabbit hole of possibilities of what is actually going on. Now I also wonder if in addition to Flag just wanting to go after Peacemaker anyway, as we know, there could also just be the concern of these portals. It's kind of something that would maybe raise the eyebrow of Argus if, let's just say, they're at risk of being unstable. I mean, interestingly, compared to Lex Luthor's dimensional portals that ended up in a black hole in Superman, White Dragon's portals seem to be a lot more stable. Now, I know Luthor kind of did that on purpose, but you have to admit, these look like a lot more of a refined technology compared to Luthor's more sciencey, Doctor Who TARDIS looking, boom tube looking portal. But either way, back on point, something could go awry here that Argus would like to keep an eye on, and that's when we hear Flag say the line in this trailer, "We need to close that dimensional rift." So perhaps Argus are going into the quantum unfolding chamber in this scene here to close the rift permanently. You could say that Peacemaker going back and forth could cause some potentially unstable dimensional energy. There is also just the possibility of Flag wanting to find Peacemaker at any cost, so even if that means going through other dimensional portal doors to find him and drag his ass back here so he can get his revenge, he'll do that. Or there's the possibility that Flag could like the idea of permanently sealing off the dimensional rift. So, all without killing Peacemaker himself, he will never, be able to get back to the DCU's dimension ever again. And that could be kind of punishment enough. Kind of take your pick there or suggest something new. But this is where we see something pretty bloody nuts in the trailer. So in this scene here, at some point in the season, we can clearly see that Argus have gained access to Peacemaker's quantum unfolding chamber. And they end up opening one of the dimensional portal doorways. I like to call it the Monsters, Inc. door, because I guess it could end up anywhere. And we see that Langston Fleury is kind of shitting a brick here because of what he's seen. Now, this is probably just a door open, door closed moment of a joke in the episode, but it's actually so crazy what dimensional door they open. As they open this doorway to this dimension in where you have these giant ass skeletal spider monster things straight out of Elden Ring or Warhammer 40k, and they appear to kind of have conquered the world. And what's more nuts is that it does seem as though there's a bunch of spikes on the ground, similar to what we saw in Cersei's vision in episode 4 of Creature Commandos, where the entirety of the DCU's heroes were killed and propped up on spikes. Well, if you look closely here, it could very well be the case that on these spikes that you can see are some of the heroes of this dimension as well. I do want to admit and not get too carried away with just kind of saying that it does get blurrier the more you zoom in, so it is kind of hard to make out, but some of these spikes do look as though that there's bodies on them, so it's not crazy to speculate that some of them could be, again, similar to Cersei's vision, some heroes who have just been wrecked by these skeleton spider things, but also with some fans even suggesting, with this long-looking cape here being cast out, could this be the Batman of this dimension, having got wrecked by these giant skeleton spiders? As after all, the Creature Commandos design also obscured Batman's design, since they, low-key don't have a final design for him yet, so they just kind of kept a huge cape being cast out into the wind. Now, this could just be a flag, and again, the more you zoom in, it kind of loses its detail, but it could be like Batman when you take into account there's clearly some other bodies propped up on spikes. So I'm not saying it is for sure, but it is a cool theory to entertain nonetheless. And it also makes you think of, if they've teased this in the trailer, while I don't want to get any expectations up, who knows what kind of crazy Easter eggs they could introduce with other doorways from the quantum unfolding chamber. Now, as for other details that we learned from James Gunn out of San Diego Comic Con, when Gunn was asked how does this fit into your new DCU versus Season 1, Gunn says straight up that, this really, Superman ends and it leads directly into this show. This show happens a month after the events of Superman, and a lot of characters return in this season of Peacemaker. In the very first episode, we have Guy Gardner and Hawkgirl and Maxwell Lord, but there's a lot more as we go down the line. But it is definitely a part of the DCU now. And maybe there's a couple of other people wandering around these halls that are in Superman, but are also in Peacemaker Season 2. So that kind of makes you think, okay, who could he be referring to? Technically, we've known for a while that there's a big cameo in Peacemaker Season 2 outside of the Justice Gang, and that's led many people to think, okay, so maybe it's Nicholas Holt's Lex Luthor, but he does say a couple of other characters that were in Superman that are also in Peacemaker Season 2, so maybe we're getting more than what we realized. So as for some bonus character details and just where everyone is at, Jennifer Holland says this about Harcourt, which does give you a bit more context after what happened at the end of Season 1. So from Season 1 to Season 2, the events that happened at the end of Season 1, Adebayo outs Waller, and that's really affected Harcourt in a huge way. She can't take it all out on her daughter, so she ruins my career and makes sure that I'm blacklisted and I'm not able to get a job. So I'm in a really bad place, and Harcourt particularly, her whole identity is her work. She doesn't know who she is without that. She feels naked without her work. It's a really vulnerable place for her. She is totally lost, and you kind of get to see how that manifests itself and the amount of sort of put on confidence that comes from that type of vulnerability in the type of person that Harcourt is, which is when they then played a scene to the Comic Con crowd of her going into a bar and beating up some people. So I think it's that scene that we saw from the first teaser. So yeah, Waller pretty pissed off, and she's made it so that Harcourt can't really get a job like that again. And I think the same could apply to Adebayo, which is why we learn what we're about to learn. But first, Vigilante, and this it's because this one's brief. Gunn said he's kind of the only character who hasn't changed or doesn't change. And I'm glad about that, because Vigilante just kind of needs to stay the way he is. We got that little bit at the end of the trailer. Looking forward to a lot more Adrian Chase, because you wouldn't really want him to change too much. Now, Adebayo, Gunn says that she is so optimistic despite everything. She just keeps believing, but she's also like Harcourt, can't work in the intelligence agencies in the United States, and she still wants to, as we've learned at the end of the first season, that she wants to be a spy or a mercenary. And so she's trying to start up her own mercenary business, and it's going absolutely nowhere at the beginning of the season. But it does doesn't bring her down. She just keeps on believing. And Adebayo is honestly, I think, as most people agree, one of like the best things about season 1. Again, one of the major things about season 1 was her relationship to Peacemaker, the friendship that came out of that. So I can't wait for her character in season 2 because she's really one of the heartbeats of the show. Now, a new addition to the cast is Saul Rodriguez's Sasha Bordeux. Now, this is one I've been paying attention to for a while, given the comic book source material connections between Sasha and Batman, and we do have something on that in a minute. But we have Saul Rodriguez saying that I did all the research I could do online and talked to James. And she also spoke on the panel about how she drafted a very, very long paragraph to send to James before filming, which consisted of a lot of questions about the character, but she never ended up sending it. But it kind of makes me wonder if when she was looking into the character, she had questions about the character's history with Batman, and is that canon in this universe? So when it came to another recent interview with IGN, this is when she's asked about how in the comics she has protected a certain billionaire with a secret affinity for bats, and is that something we can expect to see in Peacemaker, or are we joining her at a different point in her journey? And I'm so glad that somebody asked that, because I was thinking, yeah, well, technically she could have had a similar thing to the comics happen or take place before Peacemaker, and you know, adaptations don't copy and paste, so maybe Checkmate hasn't happened yet, maybe Checkmate won't happen at all. But this is where she says, I think Sasha's essence is still there from the comics, but she's bringing new vibes, new missions, and she's a badass. Yeah, but no, she has nothing to do with that story. And so as you hear that, you're kind of like, oh, okay, you know, but they could have kind of incorporated it somehow. But that's when you hear Gunn say in the background twice, he emphasizes it and says, yet. So, all while I don't want to lean into that too much because it could have just been an off-the-cuff, like, you know, yet, you know, it could still happen, kind of, maybe. It doesn't guarantee that we're going to get the Sasha Bordeux and Bruce Wayne Batman connection. I've gone over this in a previous video and how that could actually technically be canon to this universe, and we could get Checkmate, how the Waller TV show could have been building up to Checkmate, how you can involve Mr. Terrific and all of that. So, I don't know, but at best case scenario right now, this could arguably be Sasha Bordeux before she gets that detail to go to Bruce Wayne, and then those events go on from there on out, and then technically Checkmate could happen at some point in the future. So if you do really want to lean of the line of Gunn himself saying yet, it would be pretty dope if at some point in season 2 or wherever her character ends up by the very end at the finale, if there was like a line or two reference to where she's going next or how she's detailed to this Bruce Wayne in Gotham. I don't know. I do think it is a reaching theory for me, but technically it could be on the table. And Gunn said about Sasha Bordeux that Sasha is just a character I like from the comics, and I wanted somebody who maybe had a little bit of a metahuman tinge and something that was a little bit different. Now, another new addition to the cast, as we've seen across the promos, is, of course, Tim Meadows. Gunn said that they were getting pretty desperate, and they auditioned around 300 guys for Langston Fleury, and Gunn thinks that he's maybe the funniest character in the script. And I have to say, I am very much so anticipating the comedy with that character. And then there's like Michael Rooker, as we know, he's playing Red St. Wild, the world's most famous eagle hunter. They describe him as basically Eagly's Lex Luthor, and he does indeed have his own arch enemy this season. Like, Eagly gets his own fight scenes this season, so there's quite a bit to look forward to there. Another detail coming out of Comic Con is, of course, the season 2 opening dance that we'll see each and every episode. So when being asked how do you live up to that the second time round, Gunn said that it isn't trying to one-up the first season, but it's bigger, it's a different vibe to it, it's a different song, there's new characters, and there's great dancers like Frank Grillo. James Gunn also revealed that the season 2's theme song is Oh Lord by Foxy Shazam. So there we have it. That's the new song, which is quite a bit different from the Do You Really Want to Taste It? But again, I'm very game to see what they've constructed around that song, and you know, will we not be skipping it? Like, will we be watching it each and every time, every episode of the season? Also, Gunn says that, first of all, I think the soundtrack of this season is my favorite soundtrack I have ever done. It's so good with so many bands that I love. It's in line with the soundtrack from the first season, but it's a lot more modern bands, actually. A lot more songs from the past 10 to 15 years or so. But that is just about everything that I think I needed to cover about the Peacemaker Season 2 official trailer, but also with all the added little extra context and details we got out of San Diego Comic Con and some other interviews. So all that's left to be said is I would love to know your thoughts down in the comments below. What do you think about some of the theories and just discussion I said about the Season 2 trailer and plot that we're teased with in this new footage? What do you think about some of the extra details we got out of this? I'll be looking for your comments down in the comments below. But other than that, honestly, would really appreciate a like, especially, as I always say, if you got this far, definitely leave a like. Consider subscribing for future DC videos just like this. But I'm going to love you and leave you. So again, thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you fellow 11th Street kids in the next video. Goodbye.